Welcome to the SAP HANA Academy. My name is Dennis van Kempen, and in this video tutorial series we will discuss SAP HANA administration. In this video we will take a look at managing HANA systems in HANA Studio. If you're not familiar with HANA Studio, please watch the previous video in this series, which provides an overview about this HANA administration tool. Before you can start working with HANA in HANA Studio, you must first create a connection. In this video, we're going to show you how this is done and what the options are in managing connections, passwords, and so on. I'm connected here to a Windows computer and have started HANA Studio. On the left here, we have the Systems view, and this is where all our connections are listed. So, how do we create a connection? On the toolbar here above, click the icon with a computer and a green plus. Add System. Alternatively, you can right-click or control-click anywhere in the System view empty space, and the context menu will pop up, and from it you can select Add System. A new window will open where you need to specify the host name and the system number. There's a little I just before the entry field here, and when you hover over, you will get some additional information. Here we can read that we need to provide the master host name, and that for a distributed system all other host names are added automatically. Now, what does that mean? In a previous video of this series, in which we discussed SAP HANA architecture, we talked about distributed systems. In short, this allows you to scale your HANA system. The HANA database will run as a single logical unit on a number of servers. And this could be 3, this could be 10. So if a single computer is limited to say 1 terabyte of memory and 16 processor cores, but you need to support more users, thousands of them concurrently, then with HANA you can just add more servers and create a distributed system and go to 10 terabytes of memory and 160 processors. From a viewpoint of the user or the application, it still will be a single database, but now it is running on a cluster of servers, a distributed system. You only need to add the master host, and this in fact will be the master name service running on that host, and this service knows how to connect to the other nodes. Also note that the high availability aspect of a distributed system is mentioned. Should the master node be unavailable, it will automatically connect to another host. Context-sensitive help is provided by the question mark button here below. And like I said, to work with and manage an SAP HANA system in HANA Studio, you must create and configure a connection, and you can click here, and this will open the SAP HANA administration guide on this topic and provide all the required detailed information. So we have a couple of prerequisites. For example, the relevant ports in the firewall must be open. This assumes, of course, there's a firewall in place. I'm working here on a client computer running the HANA Studio client. HANA Studio communicates using SQL through a JDBC driver. We discussed this in our HANA Studio overview video. On the other side, we have the HANA index server, the database engine that listens for this and can send data back. So traffic between these two processes must be allowed. We will look at that in a minute. Also, we can read that if we want to secure communications between the server and Studio using SSL, the secure sockets layer, we need to have this set up. And we will look at this in another video. And then we need to have a database user, again, because Studio is a SQL client. And if we scroll down a little bit, we have our procedure, and we see that a host name is required, and it must be a fully qualified domain name. So let's paste our FQDN in here. This information you will have to ask the system administrator, and note that just using the IP will not work. Your client computer running HANA Studio will need to be able to resolve the host name, so add it to the local host file if the DNS has not been set up properly. And you need to speak to the network administrator if this is the case. Okay, next box is the instance number. It is required, just like the host name. If you have worked with SAP systems before, you will be familiar with instance numbers. Just like NetWeaver systems, all HANA systems have a number and an identifier, the SID, the system identifier. Together, they make for an unique system. The numbering starts at 00 and goes until 99, and the system gets its number at install time. So in case of a distributed system, the number will be the same on all the hosts. Again, this information will come from the HANA system administrator. I will enter 00 here. I did the installation myself. You can see how in the video on that topic, installing the SAP HANA server. It's in the installation playlist. Then mode. This is new as of support package stack 9, SPS 09. With this release, November 2014, multi-tenant database containers were introduced. So if you select multiple containers, you will need to specify the name of the tenant database container or otherwise select system database container. Now we're going to cover connecting to multiple containers in another view, so I will select just a single container here. Then we have description. It's an optional field. You can put in anything, but preferably something that makes sense. We've set up here a system for training purposes. I will add this to the description. Locale is the language used for the objects created in the repository. Again, a topic that was covered in the overview. Every HANA system has a catalog containing runtime objects, just like any database, tables, view, procedures. But every HANA system also has a repository containing design time objects or development artifacts. And you see both terms often used. It is similar to a source code repository like SourceSafe, Rationale, Subversion, Perforce, and allows you to easily transfer applications from one system to another, from development to production, from partner to customer, and so on. So if the objects in the repository are, say, in German, you can set it to German, and this will make sure that your umlauts and SZs are displayed correctly. Finally, we can indicate in which folder the system should be stored. Now, when I click Browse, you will see that there are no folders yet, and you cannot create them from here either, so we will do this later. Creating folders allows you to organize connections, say by department, sales, marketing, SRM, CRM, HR, by region, Europe, Americas, or by function, test, development, production, whatever makes sense to you or in your organization. Click Next. Specify connection properties. You can use the current operating system user or a database user. Now my current operating system user is administrator. This is a local user on a Windows client computer. For the HANA host, which is running on Linux, to know and trust this user, we would need to have set up some sort of common authentication mechanism for single sign-on SSO. The industry standard Kerberos can be used here, but I have not set this up, so I will just use authentication by database user. Username, I've created an account called DBA. Note that you can select to store username and password in secure storage. This way you do not have to enter username and password each time you connect. Obviously, if you share the Windows account or if you leave your computer unattended and not locked, this means that somebody else may have access as well. So only use this if you work in a secured environment. You can click the secure storage link and this will open a filtered preferences pane. We looked at the preferences already in our HANA Studio overview video. Secure storage is an Eclipse feature, nothing to do with the HANA Studio plugin. Here you can manage this. The storage is protected by a master password, and here you can change that or clear the stored passwords. I'm not going to make any changes here and will cancel this dialog. What other connection options do we have? SSL, optional, you need to have set this up, and when I select it, we can configure it in the next screen. Use the user key store, override host name, validate certificate, those kind of things. As mentioned, we'll do this in the next video, so I will go back and uncheck. SSL secure sockets layer will encrypt the data traffic, so it cannot be snooped, and also guarantee that the sender is the sender and the receiver is the receiver. So there's no spoofing, phishing, and all that. Secure communication, very important. You may want to set this up for your production system. Then we have enable SAP Start Service connection. Now what's that? We hover over. Enable an HTTP connection to the HANA server using the SAP Start Service. Actions that require operating system connectivity are possible. We just mentioned that HANA Studio is a SQL client and we just entered the database user that will connect to the database engine. This will work perfectly fine as long as the database is up and running. But say we need to restart the database for a certain parameter to take effect. 99% of the parameters do not require a restart, but there are a few that do. So we could of course restart the database and then wait for it to come back online and reconnect. But we also may want to go one level down and connect as an operating system user. Another example is when we need to do database recovery from backup. The database will be down in that case. So we need to make a more low-level type of connection. The service that makes this possible is the SAP Start service. For the SAP Basis administrators listening, this is the same as in a traditional SAP NetWeaver architecture. It's part of the SAP host agent, installed with every SAP system, and this includes SAP HANA. With this agent, we can stop and start the database, collect diagnostic information, and so on. I will show this in a minute. Communication with the SAP Start service is using HTTP, and here you can force the connection to use the secure version SPS. Click Next. The last screen is for additional properties. Additional properties for the JDBC connection. Notice that Auto Reconnect is already selected by default, and typically this field is left blank. You can think about parameters like auto commit, isolation level. In the HANA Studio overview video, we showed you where you can set these for the SQL console in Eclipse preferences. This will be valid for all systems then. Here you overrule any of these settings for this particular connection. Again, it's not very common, it's mostly left empty. Okay, finish. The system displays in the system view. We see the SID has been properly detected, HDB. We did not provide this. It was detected using the system number, user between brackets, DBA, and the description we use, training. If we select the system, the properties pane gives the same information. Description and path. Hostname, system number, single DB, we're not using the multi-tenant feature here, and the username. This information is read-only. What if we want to make any changes? Now then Ctrl-click or right-click the connection and select Properties. Shortcut key Alt+Enter. Database user logon allows us to change username or update the password value in case it has been changed. We can enable SSL in case this has been set up. We can define additional properties or change the locale, and the last tab is just for information. It lists the hostname fully qualified and the detected IP address. When using a distributed system, all the involved hosts will be listed here. The port is the JDBC SQL port 3 plus instance number plus 15. In our case, that's 30015. Yours could be 30115, 32015, whatever the instance number is. Additional properties are JDBC trace. You may need to activate this when you're having firewall troubles, for example. A common issue is that the JDBC SQL port is open, but the port to the SAP Start server is not. And this is port 5, instance number 13 for HTTP and 5, instance number 14 for HTTPS. HANA Studio will display a yellow system status even though all services are up. And this is described in note 1639.56.8 and also note 1592.92.5. When you enable trace, you may want to set a file size limit and or put the trace file on a file system other than the operating system to avoid that file traces fills it up. This file can grow very large in a short time. License is the topic of a separate video. We only have a temporary license here for the moment. Resource allows you to change the description. SAP Start Service logon is defined here. We talked about this, how to connect when the database is down. We have not provided these credentials yet, so the fields are blank. This will be the SID System Identifier ADM user, the SAP HANA Software Owner account. HTTPS can be used. Make sure the port is open in that case. And credentials can be stored in secure storage. Version history just queries the database monitoring view for us on previously installed HANA versions. And access properties defines the connection to the built-in or native application server of SAP HANA, HANA Access Extended Services. The default port is 80 plus instance number. Again, so for us that will be 80 plus 00 is 8000. And we can also configure to use HTTPS here. Now, this does not change the port of the access server, it just defines the connection. 80 plus instance number is the default, so it's already filled in here for us. However, we could change the port on the HANA server, say make it the default HTTP port 80 and 443 for HTTPS. And in this case, we then would update the ports here, but all it does is displaying access HTTP pages inside HANA Studio. So I will cancel this and now right click my system and select Lifecycle Management, Application Lifecycle Management, Home Screen. ALM, which is a HANA Access web application, will now display inside Eclipse on a tab. Should the default port for HANA Access have been changed and the properties for the connection not have been updated to reflect this, we would not have seen anything here, and Studio would not have been able to make the connection. It would have listened to the wrong port. One thing to note is that displaying web pages inside Studio is controlled by a general Eclipse property setting, so not related to HANA. Window preferences on Window or Eclipse preferences on the Mac, browser, general web browser, use internal browser, and this is the default setting, and you can use an external browser and use Internet Explorer or select new and provide the path to Chrome, Firefox, or whatever you have installed. Access applications require an HTML5 compatible browser, so don't make it too exotic. Okay, so much for system properties. One more thing to point out. Open diagnosis mode, Control plus Shift plus O. Enter the username and password of the operating system user SID ADM of the SAP HANA system. We've already seen this. To stop and start HANA or to restore the database. We use the SAP Start server, and this requires the SAP HANA software owner account. I will enter here HTTP ADM, password, and again you can select to store this in secure storage. Okay, so here we have our processes, diagnosis files, and emergency information. So this will all be very helpful when the SAP HANA server is down or when it cannot be reached using SQL. Okay, managing HANA systems in HANA Studio is documented in the HANA Administration Guide. You can access and download SAP HANA documentation free of charge on help.sap.com/HANA. Thank you for watching this SAP HANA Academy video.